I'll just review these. David sent me these. I mean, this is the recommended next steps from the Air District after our CSC approved the draft work plan at the last general session of the committee. So we're going to go over the overview of the program implementation, like how long they have to leave the RFP out, how long we have to review it. And I think we're going to talk about who gets to review it. Then, I think tonight we really want to talk about, what the qualities of that entity are. That's what we mean by entity selection. David, does that sound right?
Yeah, kind of like, is it who are you looking for, basically? Yeah. So
qualified and affordable, David. It's always that. Yeah, and then the scoring criteria. I got ahead of myself. So if anybody has any other agenda items they would like to add under urban forestry, please let me know so we can get it in here. Or you can add it yourself. It's an open document. Anybody should be able to edit it. So just to do some part on timekeeping, we're 5 minutes in. So why don't we do a quick round of introductions since it's a small group. And I'll lead by saying Matt Holmes, I'm with Little Manila, and I run an urban forestry project in the TCC program. And I will pitch it to Miss Mary Elizabeth.
I had to make it bigger. Mary Elizabeth, resident, AB617. And I'll pitch it to Ned.
Hello, everyone. Good to see that we'll have baseball. I'm a resident, and thank you very much for having me. Oh, am I supposed to give it to Stephanie?
Thanks, Ned. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ng, and I'm an air quality specialist in the Community Strategies and Resources Department with the district. And I'll pass it to Dave.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Lopez. I'm a supervising air quality specialist in our grants and incentives department. And I'd like to now pass it over to Catherine Tao.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine Tao. I'm a senior air quality specialist with the Air District, and I'll pass it over to C.
Hello, everyone. My name is C. Tao, and I'm an air quality specialist and here with the district. And I'll pass it over to Juan.
Thank you, C. Good afternoon. My name is Juan Luis Carranza, Senior Communications Rep for the Valley Air District. And I will pass it on to Alejandra Amador.
Hi, everyone. I'm a UC Berkeley student, and I'm working this semester on a project, working directly with Matt Holmes to see how we can best help you.
Ned's flashing his swag at you. He's letting you know he's a bear too. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, and I'll pass it to so many new faces. John?
And I'm not sure if maybe John's having some connectivity issues or whatnot, but maybe we can come back to John and maybe for now, I'll pass it over to Doug.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yes, my name is Doug Vigil. I'm a resident of the Subcommittee. Thank you. And I pass it to Ned Cole.
Well, that means I get 2 passes. So I guess that means, I think, Scott, we're always chatting about interesting things. I'll pass it to Scott.
Yes, I do. Thanks. Thank you, Douglas and Ned. Scott Wall, I am with the California Air Resources Board, and I am the AB617 Liaison from CARB to Stockton. And so honored to be part of all the process in Stockton, and I will hand it over to Margot.
Thank you. Hi, Margot Prowse here. I'm a resident in the AB617 area, and so pleased that these subcommittees are just really moving forward, and I'll pass it to Nate.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I'm actually from an office rather than from my office at home, and I'm just getting set up. But anyway, I'm a voting resident in Stockton, and I'm on the regular ABC's AB617 Tree Subcommittee, and I'll be soon chairing next month the Heavy Duty Truck Committee. And I'm a lifelong resident of this area and Chico State and an environmentalist. Thank you.
Is that everybody?
I don't think we heard from Casey or Matt Diaz yet.
Yes, Matt Diaz. I'll pass it to Matt Diaz.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm Matt Diaz. I'm the Advanced Planning Manager with the City of Stockton, essentially long-range planning. I'm filling in for Tristan Osborne, who is our senior planner who normally attends these meetings. But pleasure to meet everybody today.
I'll go next. I'm Casey Finnerty. I'm a grad student at UC Berkeley, helping with the course that's kind of been working with Matt. And then has Christy gone? If not, I'll pass to Christy.
Would that mean me, Christy? Yes. Sue Christie. I'm with the City of Stockton Public Works Department, and I'm work on the urban greening grants a lot, and that's why I'm here. Do I name somebody else? I don't know who went already.
I think that's the group. And then we have Mark and Armando with NorCal.
Did I hear Margot?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
All these meetings are blending together. I'm sorry. Feel like we've been there before. So David, maybe I can ask you to just sort of step in and tell us where we're at about, how we moved from the approval last month or earlier this month to implementation.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, everybody. So after the last committee meeting where the CERP project plan was presented to the whole group, and it sounded like it got approval from everybody there, which was great. We submitted to CARB the CERP project plan. It is currently under review with CARB. They did, just kind of an FYI, I just received the day before a request to update an administrative document that we normally submit to CARB whenever we do a new plan. So that is, we've updated that information and sent it back to CARB, which was pretty straightforward and easy. So we're just now waiting for the approval. And of course, if there's any feedback from CARB, we'll take into an account. But I think so far, since we've done urban greening and vegetative barriers in other communities, we used kind of some of the similar project plans and moving forward with that. So in the meantime, the idea was to start kind of developing or start working the development with the community groups here on, the RFP itself. And then, we're hoping that the CARB review won't be too much longer. Obviously, this RFP will take a little bit of time to develop. So, I'm not, based off some of the previous project plan reviews, I think we're okay on time. So.
Cool, thanks. And well, then maybe we don't need to delay and we can just jump into the next. I mean, I think last time we talked, right, we were struggling with whether or not we were going to be able to get some of because we don't have enough money to build a vegetative barrier everywhere we want. And we were talking about priorities, and there's a condition in our work plan about considering baseline data when we identify a spot. And Ned was particularly interested in making sure we're doing this somewhere where we know what air quality is like, and so that we can actually see that we accomplished something by planting these trees. And I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah.
Hey, Matt, maybe I can kind of just briefly give a little bit of what the goal of the RFP is. So, the goal of the RFP from the district here and in the group is to find a sub-awardee or a subgroup to basically implement the urban greening program. We would contract with them. First, we would open the RFP. The RFP would be asking for the different criteria, what the program implementation would be. And basically, we're trying to solicit different organizations or agencies to come back saying, hey, our agency or organization has this experience. We've done these types of projects in the past. And, looking at your community, this is where we, either working with the community itself to identify locations, or, basically we have the experience, and you kind of made a point about it earlier. We're able to do it under at a low cost. We're able to administer these types of programs, and the district would then, in conjunction with the subcommittee or the CSC, would award these entities, and then begin the process of going into a grant agreement with them, a contract for them to implement the program. So
yeah.
So that's our goal of our RFP.
No, I hear that. I also think that there are some peculiar problems with a project like this. Like, it's one thing for Sonoma Tech to know a lot about air pollution and dispersion in a community, which they do. They're like as good as it gets. And if we could get them, I think that would be great. I just also don't know, like, do they have a history of designing vegetative barriers? And do they, and I guess, like, there's two people that I know of that do this kind of work. And so I know we have to do an RFP because you're a public agency, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're exhausting our thinkers in making sure that we're getting the right people for this assignment. Did anybody else even apply? You've had the RFP out for Fresno, right?
No, we're still in development.
Okay, great. You guys get any hits on anyone else that might plausibly be interested in this work?
Fresno has a group, I think it's called Tree Fresno, who's interested in the Fresno area. I believe Kern County, we're working on one with Shafter. We haven't launched that RFP either. We're getting closer. That, I believe there's a group down there, Kern Tree, I can't remember the name. Who's possible interested parties. We're looking to see who we get, but we're hoping that there is a group, depends if it's local or within the region or whatever.
Gotcha.
Who has the experience in implementing these types of projects.
Ned, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just do want to reiterate what I think is the consensus of everyone, that this RFP is going to give preference to locating vegetative barriers, urban greening, where we have emission monitors so that we can have linkage. So hopefully there's no doubt whatsoever. I was a little surprised that the plan didn't sort of mention a dedication to preference of locations to be linked up to the emissions monitors, but hopefully everyone agrees. Is that correct?
Well, this is Margot. I just like to say, if there's an entity that has a suggestion for a placement, like a location, most of our monitors are mobile, so we ought to make sure that they are positioned where they need to be when we're coming up with decisions. Is that a doable thing?
Yeah, and I guess I should disclose that we will have the entire city of Stockton gridded with local PM sensors in the next few months. And so Little Manila and the Attorney General's office and UC Merced will have the entire city instrumented in the next several months. And that's not including the Air District's 7 community air monitoring plant sites in South Stockton. So I think, Ned, anywhere in the study area is going to have pretty robust baseline data that would let us evaluate the forestry. Does that kind of rise to the challenge?
Well, again, we have the SOIA health studies at places like St. George, and we have significant problems, I think, at Washington School, where we don't have as much cooperation as we want. These very important, I think they may be the most important measures of vegetative barriers and urban greening should be placed preferentially. I just score them some more points if they're close to these areas that are being studied for health study purposes and where there are air monitors for sure. For instance, around, I think, the Port of Stockton, you're going to have a very enhanced type of monitoring, not just crude PM 2.5. So please just score the RFPs hire for locations that can yield real world data on health outcomes.
Sorry, I muted myself. I think so, David. I mean, that's a narrative piece of criteria in our work plan about baseline data and, you know, performance period air monitoring data. That's in the work plan. Is that something that, you know, I guess we'll see when we see some text on the RFP, if that's, if what Ned's asking for and I'm supporting, if that's honored in the RFP.
Well, that's the thought, right? If so, the project plan is kind of the items that we've submitted to CARB saying that, you know, there's going to have this criteria, this type of funding, this type of, you know, the goal, you know, the objective of the RFP. This is went through this process. You know, in terms of when it comes to releasing an RFP, like I get where the you know, determining site locations, preferential locations. You know, we can put that type of language into an RFP. The other thing is you know, as you were kind of saying, Matt, you know, who's out there, who's local? Are we limiting, you know, are the sites, is the property owner allowing us to put trees in at those sites? You know, those type of things could, you know, there are those, you know, those other things that you take into account. And with this RFP, you know, I think the idea is the applicant kind of presents that to us, like, hey, we've been working with these groups, we have a partnership with the local communities, you know, if it's the city or if it's some other possible partner who wants to have trees, school districts, school locations, you know, but those may not have, those monitors may not necessarily be right there, but it might be still a good location. So, you know, if, you know, we can have some language in there, but maybe having some flexibility in the RFP in terms of who we, you know, who the group wants to go forward with in the end, I think is helpful. You know, it's just, but I think we can, if we put something that's, if it gets too, maybe say restrictive or ties us down, you know, it could limit us. But you know, I think we can add language in there and talk about the importance of data and, or these other, you know, there's reference to studies being done or being conducted. And I think that's possibly one way the applicant can try to sell themselves as the, you know, the entity that we award.
Understood. Yeah. Yeah, like if you put in a restriction, I see Mary Elizabeth's comments about Roosevelt Elementary. Like I have no confidence that I could carry out a forestry project there in the next 3 years during this performance period because it's Stockton Unified. Whereas with,
Oh, but my mom taught there for several years, so I'm sure we could do something.
oh, okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, Stockton Unified School District has rejected participating in any of this formally 3 times in public. And free money too. So I'm sort of aghast.
Who did you contact staff or did you go to the board?
They had trustees sitting in these meetings for 20 months who were unable to carry water for that measure. Whereas Ned, to your issue, you're like around All Saints Academy, you know, Little Manila was intimately involved in instrumenting that facility. They will have a full year of indoor and outdoor air monitoring, and they will absolutely let us plant trees near there. You know, there's a utility for that. And then Sue, there is some synergy with, I mean, I feel you on Roosevelt. That place is literally, you can see the tailpipe from the kickball diamond. And it's no good, but you know, I think, well, I wish the school district was a full partner in all this. I think we've all said that repeatedly. But David,
Matt, this is Aaron Tarango. Can I say one thing to that? Maybe in the RFP, like you can have some sites listed as possibilities, and they can see if they can put those in there as, like, you know, it wouldn't limit it, but hey, these are where the committee would like to have these. However, we understand that's not always possible, but in your RFP, do you have any contacts with these people to show we can actually have something done there? So maybe it's, you list the sites you want, but you don't basically lock it down where you have to do it right here type thing. Maybe you have a hybrid approach.
Yeah, and I can just say to like that tension between those two sites, Roosevelt is to the west of Interstate 99, whereas, most of AB 617 is to the east of the I-5 Highway 4 tangle and the Port of Stockton. And the PM map for the city of Stockton is very clear that it really is in that homestead area, stretching to the south and to the east from the I-5-4 tangle. Roosevelt does not experience, I can say this anecdotally, and I'll prove it to you in a year. Roosevelt does not experience the same levels of PM pollution as St. George. So I think if we just walk back to using PM dispersion modeling to determine where we put a vegetative barrier, then we're really covering our butts and we're using science to make that decision instead of, the political choices, which, is the best part about air monitoring. You don't have to use influence or preference to decide where capital improvements go. We can use data, that inhuman stuff.
And then I think for this one, right, David, we're just talking about the urban greening, correct? Not the vegetative barriers one yet, correct?
Well, yeah, right now, I guess it'd probably be the urban greening, but the idea is that the RFP would look very similar. Obviously, there's a little bit of different requirements, different types of a project, right? But yeah, for urban greening, and then of course with vegetative barriers, you want something near to a roadway that's going to block out that road pollution. But
I just want to make sure we're in these discussions where we talk about them completely separate because they are different animals,
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And I do think that like the St. George example is actually pretty well suited to the urban greening strategy because it is a neighborhood level streetscape that's pretty much denuded. But yeah, so I'll just tell you that like a vegetative barrier at the roadway can knock down high percentage of PM. You get it several hundred feet or 1,000 feet away from the freeway, and the dispersion is much more diffuse, and you lose your ability to knock down a lot of it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't still have trees near schools, cooling them and knocking down nearby pollution. So maybe that's the urban greening strategy can help supplement a vegetative barrier strategy, which still has lots of jurisdictional problems.
Yeah.
You guys ever get Caltrans down there at the table in Fresno? I know they got some pretty active folks in West Oakland, but I don't know that anybody ever moved to action.
Not yet. I mean, that's like I said, the vegetative barriers one's gonna be, I believe it might just my hypothesis, gonna be a lot larger lift than urban greening.
Yeah. And maybe there's a pivot there where we have lots of city-owned frontage roads and setbacks, like from the Corporation Yard down to 8th Street, that could be alternatives to getting into the Caltrans setback. Long-term, Caltrans needs to be wrapped in freeway trees. Practical terms, we have 3 years to spend this money.
Yeah.
And make it matter. And so maybe that's a consideration in the vegetative barrier strategy, that we don't write something too rigorous and principled to be implemented in the turnaround thinking time frame of our state transportation agency. I will say I meet with them quite a bit, and I keep trying to get this. They will not give me an encroachment permit unless I pay for it. They'll give the city and the county a free waiver, but the city and county don't want to assume permanent responsibility for Caltrans's property, and I wouldn't either. And so I've asked them, will you give the city a free encroachment permit if it's conditional, and that the city can back out of it if their community partner flakes? And then it just goes back to the status quo, which is the wonderful outcomes we're getting right now in the Caltrans right away. And so they've sent that back to legal, and they're asking those questions. I guess, Aaron, a question for you on that would be, like, if this moonshot works and Department of Transportation says, yes, we will grant the city a conditional use permit for our right of way that the city can abrogate if the city's partner turns out to be a flake. And then we have right of way. There's a lot of ifs in there, but then we do have right of access. And then we then we could write a targeted RFP for the vegetative barriers.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, my thought a little bit was to stagger them a little bit. You go out with urban greening, kind of get that going, and then you kind of stagger it a little bit, and then you do the vegetative areas, you have a little more time to make sure
Yeah,
you
I'm
really
with-
dial in the areas. So my thought, that's just my thought. It can always change, but that was kind of my thought. Not do them exactly the same time because it might be a little confusing because you might have the same groups, maybe.
Yeah.
Targeting those. So just a thought there.
Yeah, I'll
Big
just say
stagger,
that,
but a little bit of stagger.
I'll just say that like City Public Works and Caltrans are both like really trying to think about how to make this work for everybody that
Yeah.
isn't in those conversations. There's just always, you got to check with what a headquarters, central command, whatever it's called. So I think we can get there. And Aaron, that's probably a wise strategy, is to get urban greening rolling. And maybe like Ned, to your challenge, like the vegetative barrier research is actually still really thin. I mean, the only people that I know that have done this have been HIFI. That's HIFI Design Labs out of West Oakland. And they've done both a sensitive receptor vegetative study and a mobile source facility vegetative barrier. And they said, yeah, you want to plant closest to the freeway. That doesn't mean there aren't more things to look at, and so maybe we can use our urban greening strategy for all the benefits of urban greening in a neighborhood that absolutely needs it, to evaluate how great is that difference. And then there's this other issue, which is that we can get all the money we want to plant trees. We still can't get any money to buy the equipment and pay the people to maintain them. And is there a way for these RFPs to help us address that challenge?
It can be used for maintenance. We actually wrote that into the project plan. It can be used for maintenance. So we're hoping that the contractor selected would actually have that built into their proposal of ongoing maintenance to make sure they don't die within 2 years. That would be a disaster.
Yeah.
So that was the goal, of have them write it in as part of their cost to implement this type of project.
Would it be appropriate or even smart or dumb for us to talk about like percentages of that RFP that could go to new trees versus maintenance?
No, that's a big part of the discussion today is their overhead costs, their administration costs to run it, the actual cost of the trees themselves. And I think that could be a lot of the scoring criteria. I think it'll help us develop it as far as the scoring criteria. But I don't know if we want to straight limit it. We can have some ballpark and then have them present what they want to do to us. I think that we start limiting everything, we might back ourselves in the corner we can't get out of and start over.
I've been in that corner. Yeah, I've been in that corner.
Yeah.
I've run CAL FIRE grants for 5 years. And it's been a race to the bottom against cities that have fully funded public works departments.
Yeah.
Because they could always outcompete us. Let's see. Scott, I see your hand. Go ahead, sir, please.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I just wanted to circle back a little bit to the whole monitoring in conjunction with the location conversation. I don't know really anything about this technically. I was hoping that we would actually have OEHA here today, but I guess they did not receive the invite. So I will make sure that they are here for the next meeting. But I'm wondering if maybe we want to carve out a little bit of time at the next meeting to really, I guess, see if we can bring in some experts that have the science behind this and just talk a little bit more about what kind of data could we expect? What's the validity of it, the feasibility of collecting it? I know that we actually have staff at CARB that have written papers and studied vegetative barriers. OEHA has expressed, Lily Wu specifically has expressed concern about her understanding of the limitations as it relates to capturing that data and how relevant it really is to that environment. And so I've been hearing like a lot of other chatter that I think might be helpful for everybody on the subcommittee to maybe have a higher level conversation with some folks that are specialists in this area from CARB and from OEHA and really anybody else that you think might be helpful to bring in here. But I'm happy to facilitate that if you think it might be beneficial to add that as kind of, a carve out of the next meeting to have this conversation and really dig a little bit deeper into that.
Anybody want to respond to that? Like I have two thumbs and they're both up. And then the other thing I would say to that, Scott, is I've got like a spatial data. What is he called? Well, he's a data ninja. I'll just call him that. And he's the guy from UC Merced who's got a, supercomputer and has gridded Stockton. And so he could maybe talk with the CARB folks because they have a mobile pollution inventory for Stockton, which is a lot of comma separated values spreadsheets that when Matt looks at it, he gets cross-eyed. But Charanya, who I assume you're talking about, Scott, bringing from mobile inventory, no?
I was actually, I guess my thought was a little bit even higher level than the actual inventory, which Sharon, you would be the one for that, but maybe a little bit higher level of like what have past studies told us about the usefulness of vegetative barriers? What might be some limitations in trying to do fence line monitoring on both sides of the barriers? That's the kind of stuff that I just really want to make sure that we're making smart decisions here with people that know vegetative barriers more specifically, or are, I'd say, experts in the health effects area. And so Sharanya, I don't know that Sharanya would be, unless you want to do some kind of like linking to the actual mobile source inventory to this.
Well, I think what I thought she would be useful for is to, like in the scenario we looked at between Roosevelt Elementary versus All Saints Elementary, can someone besides Matt say something thoughtful about who might have the most urgent PM pollution from nearby freeways? And Charanya, I think, has a pretty good idea of what the grid looks like around here.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I agree 100% on your thoughts on that. And I would see that maybe as a next step, even beyond what I'm proposing for the next meeting.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
No, I agree. So I'm just capturing in the notes here, recommendation of CARB and OWIHA people. And OWIHA, I'm always talking to OWIHA people and they're not here. They eat up most of the day.
They had, Lily Wu had offered to be here, but I made the mistake of not actually double checking that she was actually on the invite list for this thing. And so that was on me. So she wasn't aware that it was happening. So
that's okay. I'm going to community co-host the next CSC meeting with them about the sphere study, which for everyone else is a study that's going to study both local air pollution, indoor air pollution, and sound pollution, because there appears to be a healthy correlation between sound pollution and PM dispersion. So they will present at the next CSC meeting. And if we can find out that we can monitor sound, we can learn a lot more about pollution in our communities a lot cheaper and faster and in more real time. So it's a really cool study. And I wanted them to share it with everybody on the CSC at the April meeting. And it looks like we'll be meeting in April before we have another tree subcommittee meeting where we can hear from your experts, Scott. And I got calls from the vegetative barrier people that I know at EPA and at HIFE, and they just couldn't make it today. So I'm going to bribe them to come to the April meeting as well.
And Matt, were you going to make the connection between your data ninja and CARB, or did you want to give me your person's name and I can connect them with our vegetative barriers folks?
Let me email you and Alec.
Okay.
And say, Alec, you have to help me because you're getting paid to do this.
Perfect. I'll stay in touch with you, Matt, on kind of like progress and who we're bringing in, and have you just I guess verify that you think they're the right folks that are going to really touch on all of that.
Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, Ned, this has really been your issue from the beginning of all of this. Where's the monitoring? What do we know? And I think we're going to finally get some of that baseline characterization of dispersion, just 20 months later than I think we wanted it. But if like, are you looking for any distinction between specific public health outcomes? Like, is there a need for a county health department person?
Yes, if you're talking to me, I think absolutely. This is
okay.
But you know, public health is what we're for here, and we really should be dedicated to public health benefits. So one of my concerns has always been is that the classic public health function seems to have eroded. Certainly doesn't get quite the resources that some others do. So yes, public health and the whole bit. I put a little comment. Let's, you know, get us some of the literature of the so-called experts as they may speak to the specifics. We do have, I think, at St. George, a very excellent health initiative there. I'd like to see that expanded. So yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah, and I think, you know, Monica White and Brianna Rubio have come to successive CSC meetings. And so I can ask them if they could make themselves available for the April trees subcommittee meeting. That sounds right? Oh, I'm sorry. I see a hand there, Doug. Go ahead, bud.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I also when you talk about veggies, are you talking about iceberg like taxes? Because I think like Ned, we're talking about like reinforce, like having the health reinforce it to benefit the public, to enforce it that way the public would know that this is for our health, this is the cause away from the pollution and everything else going on. But what about the levee? Are we gonna able to get the pollution, the smell of tree to kind of go through to the tree or something from the pollution from that particular area, from that other than the traffic area? It's just one of my ideas. You know, the thing that you're doing is great, but what about other areas that are polluted in that area? So I could consider a veggie option, also include that in that.
You know, that's Doug. I had this conversation.
You know what I mean?
earlier today about levees and the waterways, because you're picking up odors from the stagnant waterways. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, and some of that is a harmful algal bloom. And so, you know, hopefully that's not what you're smelling, because that's an aerosolized toxin that we don't want you to be breathing. But we do have another subcommittee that is meeting about that. And there's actually really cool traction happening there. I think when we wrote the work plan, though, we were really focused on vehicle-related emissions. And so we weren't looking specifically at odors. But maybe somebody from the air district, you guys have an odor reporting responsibility. Is that not true? And does that apply to stinky water or just smelly buildings? Does anybody know the answer to that?
Well, it's got to be from a man-made source. If it's out in the water, I don't know who's responsible.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, there's questionable discharge from certain industrial entities, but the main problem is we just take all the water before it gets to Stockton and we dump it on cows and almonds and stuff. Yeah, I didn't think that would apply to the odor rule either.
Yeah, because you have.
I'm sorry. I don't want to make it that difficult for that particular instance. I just want to make sure that if that's part of the environmental pollution, or it's just a way of the world, are you just talking about dirt and everything and just focusing on that area and focusing, like, I don't know if it's like iceberg. I used to see that when I was little, they were all over around the freeway and when you go into the city, you know, and look beautiful, but it cut the cost, but you don't have to re-water them all the time. And also it faced a lot of summer heat and everything. So even when the rain sprouts real quick and then they last a whole year green, you know what I mean? So that's a suggestion. I'm I'm just throwing an idea, but the way that you guys are doing it, you're doing an excellent idea regarding to having a direct with a health director. You know what I mean?
That helps, Doug. Yeah. Well, just so you know, you have the right to report an odor and you don't have any obligation to live with unnecessary man-made odors. And Valley Air District is responsible for helping you address that. But that may not be a vegetative barrier concern. So just to recap on this whole entity selection conversation, I've got notes in here from Ned talking about how do we make sure the RFP cites meaningful baseline data. Scott's going to help bring in some experts about how to evaluate that data. I'm going to add the spatial data person just to let you guys know about our dispersed remote sensor network so that we will be sort of pinning down the air pollution map. And Matt is raising his hand to email the county health department and and the researcher from Merced who's developing a spatial PM map for us. Does anybody else have any other questions about things we need to learn about before we finalize and those criteria in an RFP for urban greening, not necessarily vegetative barriers? I mean, there's a lot of overlap there. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think that there should be, a clear understanding of what all is required at the location where the planting occurs. Whether it be a private person or some public agency. And I think if we had a real clear understanding of that, we may have to make some decisions, based on those findings that are not related at all to any of the important ideas and efforts.
So you were talking about sort of evaluating the geography or the placement of the tree planting?
Property easements.
Oh, okay, right, yeah. Who will let us in? Yeah, so that whole right of access conundrum. Yeah, I mean, it sure would be great if Caltrans would just give us the keys, but I think they have reasons for not doing that. I thought about adopting it. Maybe the CSC could adopt a stretch of Highway 5, but they only allow sort of seasonal activity. That's one way. Like if trees only needed maintenance 4 times a year, we could get away with that. But they don't. Someone's going to need to visit these trees on a weekly basis throughout the hot summer months for at least 3 to 5 years. So hopefully we can resolve that jurisdictional thing. And then Mary Elizabeth, to your point, like that's part of that justifying what would be a reasonable chunk of the maintenance work in the ultimate scope of work in the vegetative barrier and urban greening.
How much is Air District gonna charge for administration? You wanted to get onto that just a little bit on what might be expected for that breakout?
I hadn't even thought of that.
That is not us. That is the contractor that we are selecting to do the work. So,
Right.
And that's part of their proposal, right? So you have those things listed out in the RFP, and we kind of present their proposal to us of how they plan on doing this work, and you do it for 500 grand, 2 500 grand ones, 2, a bunch of $300,000 ones, or one $1 million project, right? So like Matt explained, we have 3 years, right? So like to secure the right of ways, secure the property to do, I just, I wouldn't want to do more than probably 2. Just my thought, just for the time. Maybe 2 $500,000 ones, maybe $1 million one for $1 million. I don't know. That's up to the committee here, but I just kind of throwing things out there as far as I think Matt's well aware and the group was aware of the time frame here to pull this off, and this doesn't happen just overnight. So I do want us to take that into account.
Yeah,
that's a question we have to figure out as a group here, and it's your guys' group. We're just here to kind of answer some questions and make sure we do this thing correctly, and get it out
and
there.
Just to add, the project plan right now has, we allow up to 25% for we call it non-construction costs, which includes like design, permitting, admin, direct cost admin. But obviously, if they can do that for cheaper, then that's a plus for them, right?
Yeah. So that's an interesting point, David. So like to really give the air dispersion question that Ned has kept in front of us front and center, somebody gets a $1 million contract to implement urban greening in this area. You could ostensibly spend $250,000 on a local air pollution dispersion study to,
Well, I think that also go towards other things like outreach,
okay, all of the
design.
above. Gotcha.
Yeah. All the other items that go into the project, not
And
just.
their admin costs to administer the grant.
Yeah,
like
their
the
admin
agency
costs,
gets paid, to do it.
Okay, so admin, design and outreach, all of that's 25%. And then
Yeah.
so 75% of this grant needs to go into planting trees and maintaining trees.
Yeah, and portion of that could be actually for future maintenance. So it could be, I don't know what they would charge for that. So that's up to the company who does it, right? So
Yeah, well, that's it. But yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty generous. And I'll just say I've never gotten to plant trees that I got to maintain. This could
well,
be-
and that's for the committee to decide. Do we want to maintain it just like you get a year after the maintained and that's all you pay for and then off and running, or it's for us to decide, right? Like how long do you really want to do that for?
Yep.
Now I'm thinking here, I'm gonna put Dave on the spot here, but I know we have some draft RFPs already done. So I'm wondering if during the next meeting, we present it to the committee and kind of give you a draft as far as, here's a draft, maybe here's a start, and start making comments on that in the next, subcommittee meeting, and then, kind of move from there. Maybe by May, we come back and say, look, okay, here we go. Here's our questions, here's our comments, here's what we like to steer this thing, kind of moving forward. So I know we have a kind of a base RFP we can start with and kind of go from there. Just a thought. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but just a thought to kind of get it rolling here.
Yeah, I mean, if we could see that at least we would know what your RFP looks like.
Yeah.
And obviously it would need to be edited and changed, and it doesn't look like we'll have any of that thunk through until after we hear from folks at the next April meeting.
So maybe at the April meeting, we'll present it and then we'll get we'll get those comments and then we'll present it at the April meeting and then take it back. Everybody makes their comments, questions, and come back for the next meeting. It's okay. Here's some comments for it and maybe move forward that way. I'm just throwing it out there. It's up to, Matt, I know you're kind of leading the charge here a lot of the times. And so I look to you a little bit as far as like, how you foresee this moving forward, I guess, to really get it out there in people's hands to make some comments here.
Yeah, well, I don't see a lot of time left in the clock for us to read through that together and
no, not today, not
kind of
today.
meaningful comments. But if we could get that copy sent out in
Yeah.
in the intervening days, I did want to just review. So we went through, selecting the entity. We did end up talking about some of these scoring criteria, even though I didn't really organize it in a smart way. We talked about administrative overhead and maintenance costs versus outreach and design costs. Were there any other scoring criteria that folks wanted to bring up? I mean, like Doug's brought this up in the past. Why do we always got to listen to somebody from West Oakland? Maybe there's somebody from Stockton who could do this. So have any of the other communities, Aaron, put in like a local hire clause that we would prefer an applicant?
No, not yet. I mean, I think that I know in Fresno there's a giant group here called Tree Fresno. They're pretty big. They do a lot.
Yeah.
But we don't limit it to that because we do, like I said, we want to limit ourselves into a corner and say, well, shoot, we get to start over.
Yep. No, I think, yeah, I agree with that. But anybody else have scoring criteria that they wanted to just throw out there so that we could?
City has an ordinance on local hires. If you want to copy something like that,
I want to
give
copy
them
the
extra
ordinance.
points if they're local. It doesn't
Yeah,
include-
priority or preference points, right? Isn't that what they call them?
Yes.
And I'm guessing sustainability plants would be a natural part of it.
Yeah, I think nobody's gonna get allowed to plant a tree that isn't drought tolerant and suited for. I'll tell you, like in our TCC project, Devil Mountain won't sell us a dumb tree. They just won't give us a tree because it makes them look bad. But Margot, yeah, so that's I think that might be well, maybe that's an overview of the RFP. Well, I'll just put it in here. Plant hardiness as a scoring criteria. Were there any other items out there that folks wanted to talk about, since we've got about 7 minutes left? What about any of my friends from from Berkeley. We have students who are trying to learn about how the sausage is made in community engagement projects. Alejandra, you sent me a note about tree size. Do you want to add some detail to that?
Hi, yes, sure. So what I sent to Matt was maybe considering the cost and benefit analysis of planting medium to larger trees, which can offer a more pronounced canopy in a shorter amount of time, as opposed to a smaller tree that would require more maintenance and take longer years for a pronounced canopy. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. Just so you guys know, usually when you plant trees for the state, some grumpy forester only liked 15-gallon buckets, and you're only allowed to buy a 50.
That's because the viability of the trees in the larger planters is somewhat infringed.
Yeah, totally. Sue's absolutely right. However, I have been in multiple planting scenarios where a 5-gallon bucket was a whole lot easier to carry to the planting site, and it was irrigated. And the UC researchers that I was working with actually said a 5-gallon tree that's well maintained has a better growth cycle and better longevity than a tree that's transplanted at the 15-gallon stage. But I don't want to make that argument here, because I really like Alejandra's argument about planting big trees that accelerate vegetative or cooling capacity. So maybe we could buy some big trees. So which kind of brings us to a question about, we don't have to hit any like greenhouse gas numbers on this, right? We don't have to hit like carbon sequestration values.
No, what we want to do is, though, we want to put those into the iTree calculator and find out what in the end, find out what we got. I mean, we'll do that,
Okay.
but no, there's no target, no.
Cool. Yeah. So an iTree calculator, just so everybody knows, you can put in a different tree in a different location, and it'll tell you its value. And usually its value matters more based on where you plant it. Is it south to the west of a house? But Alejandra's suggestion could be evaluated with that tool. We could buy some big, tough bay laurels and put them right next to a freeway in the future project, and they could survive. Oh, Mary Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thanks. I had put this in chat, and I think as we're moving forward and maybe considering this longer range maintenance, that we investigate and perhaps do some kind of initial study regarding the development of a community service district for trees in Stockton.
You've been bugging my phone?
No, I haven't.
Everybody's been saying it for years.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was just talking with Delta people today about all their islands disappearing because nobody maintains them. Yeah, that sounds like a community service district for long-term maintenance. I'll tell you, when I did forest, we got 3 minutes. Let's just leave it at that. You guys don't need to hear a tale of yore. Any other comments that anybody wants to share? Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, thanks. I have a quick, an admin comment here. So I want to just check with this meeting whether or not we want to kind of make so this is our last meeting for this recurrence. Do we want to continue? I think this is the fourth Tuesday of every month, if I'm correct. Oh, third Tuesday. This is the third Tuesday. Do we want to continue on for the next couple months? Do we want to just do a one-off for this next April meeting?
That's a good question. It's amazing how fast a month goes by. So if we were looking at third Tuesday, we'd be looking at April 19th. Is that right? Yes. Is everybody cool with meeting again in a month, or do we sorry, phone ringing.
Yeah, and that's totally up to you. If we think that we need to take a little more time to gather folks or just kind of take a look at documents, it doesn't have to be, like you said, a month does come up quickly. It's totally up to this committee. We just don't have a next meeting set.
Yeah, well, I think the juicy question on this is, when can we get Scott's friends from CARB together so that we can dive into the vegetative barrier issue? So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to push it up any closer, but I don't think I want to delay it either. So any objections to keeping the same meeting time, everyone? I see a thumbs up. Let's keep it, Stephanie. Yeah,
If I could just say, I mean, I would be in favor of actually just having this be a recurring meeting like the CSC on that third Tuesday of every month, kind of like going forward. And if something changes or for some reason we don't need a meeting, we can always cancel them. But I would be in favor of actually maybe pushing out for the rest of the year, this third Tuesday of every month. That way we can kind of plan around it, would be my vote.
yep. Okay, yeah, I kind of got used to it.
Sounds good. I'll keep the recurrence, and then like Scott's suggesting, if we plan to skip a month or anything, we'll just communicate that.
Okay, and just since there's been some confusion about the agenda, for those of you that are Google Doc savvy, you can edit the Word doc for the agenda in Google Docs, but when I did this last time, it was kind of embarrassing. So work in the Word version wherever you work on it. Here, I'll put it back in the chat. This is the one we've been sitting in. And I removed the old version that had lapsed. So if anybody was in the wrong agenda, that's the one you want now. And I will link it in the sign-in sheet, which has never changed. So thanks. And I want to make sure everybody signs in. Even our friends from Berkeley, will you sign into this sign-in sheet that's in the agenda right here at the top under Subcommittee Resources? Here, I'll share my screen. And anybody can go home if they're tired of listening to me talk. But I want to thank everybody for coming, but this is the sign-in sheet. This was the old work plan draft that we worked on. And if anybody wants to recommend other resources, you can send them to me or just drop them here into the document.
And then Matt, I think the action item for us, I think is we'll have the RFP, I guess, ready to go for you to look at next meeting. Is that what you would like at that point in time?
Yeah, well, can we also see like just the format of what an RFP from the Valley?
Yeah, I think in the next week or so, David can get it to Stephanie and then get it out to the group.
Yeah, and just so long as everybody understands what David sends out to us is not what we're trying to do yet, that we're just sort of getting oriented to the paper.
Make sure to put big draft across the watermark on it. So
it's just I think it's just a good base to see kind of the base of it and kind of go from there.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. But then if we could get something looking more like a draft by the April meeting, we don't need to eat up the whole clock evaluating that, because we should be able to review that RFP and move it from draft to maybe there's an ad hoc committee meeting that comes out of the April where we can recommend for approval at the May meeting, at the May CSC for an RFP. Do we need that?
Yeah, so we'll get it out for you to look at the next week or so, and then we prepare for the comments that might come.
Okay.
We can make the changes there and just kind of keep moving it forward.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna keep typing these notes in here,
Yep.
but nobody has to stay. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, Aaron,
Yeah.
is that an empty bookcase back there?